Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Wow. I'll tell you what, you take a day off and a million things happen. Isn't that interesting? My show notes were massive for this particular episode, as one might expect. Of course, not having recorded here since Friday. But hope everybody, again, had a great Easter. Welcome back as usual. There's no doubt that I'm going to mess up something here in this episode. I'm going to end up leaving something out that I certainly didn't want to, so my apologies if there's a particular story that I don't hit on. Again, I was furiously writing a number of things down, of course, as they were all happening, certainly over the last number of days here, but we'll see what I get to, and, again, if I don't get to something, my apologies. Plenty of geopolitical things per usual. I have some education audio to play as well, and some other education stories also, along with a few jab-related things too. So first, let me start with this. Again, there are over 10,000 pages of RFK Jr. files that are out there now. They're available on the archives.gov website, which is archives.gov/research/RFK. Again, anybody can click on those. Numerous pages of endless PDFs. They were all released, I believe, on the 18th of April, and there's plenty there. 10,185 pages across 229 PDFs. Again, I'm not sure that I can go through them any more than anybody else. I know a lot of people probably will do that, and they should. We know of the Israeli connections, of course. We know Sirhan didn't kill him. A lot of this is already well known. And we know, again, the Jewish connection and the Jewish lobby connection to all of this also. So, with that said, and just in brevity, I would simply say you can bounce over there and check those out, of course, anytime that you're interested. It's interesting stuff because it's real American history, and it will show people, again, how evil our government is and how, yes, our government kills our own government and, of course, kills innocent people and 1,000 other things, and we work with other governments to do the exact same thing. And I don't think that should shock anybody, and certainly not at this stage of the game. So there's that. Also, of course, before the weekend, the Supreme Court temporarily blocked Trump's usage of the Alien Enemies Act. This was across not really party lines. Thomas and Alito were the only ones, of course, to dissent from the entire thing. And Alito wrote a rather very apt description of the rest of the court members himself by saying this is completely political. You're doing this in an effort, again, to politicize the entire issue without letting lower courts even make their decisions beforehand. So, yeah, the court's compromised. There's no doubt about that. Again, that should almost go without saying at this point. But, again, it's temporary. Their ruling was temporary. So he has the right to do it, but it'll just depend, again, on lower court actions potentially in the future, and we'll see what happens with all of that. Okay. Two other things. Regarding the Pope's death, the amount of communications that were taking place regarding the Pope's death were overwhelming. Direct links to Q posts, J.D. Vance being there wearing a gold tie, the simple fact that we've confiscated, again, the gold back from the Vatican, and did so whenever we did it, certainly within recent years, if not, again, during Biden's administration. Hence all the references to, of course, Fort Knox, the fact that the money was taken out of Fort Knox or gold and then shipped probably overseas, but then we've recovered it back. There were endless communications regarding that, again, during Biden's fake administration. And that certainly seems to be the case. Again, was the Pope executed by a military tribunal or other individuals? I don't know. I know there's a lot of speculation regarding that, again, regarding him specifically in relation to child trafficking or stealing wealth of countries or a number of other things, pedophilia, you name it. Again, I wouldn't put any of that past the Pope or the Vatican, of course. They've been engaging in all of that for quite some time. But I just find the timing, again, to be not accidental. Certainly, of course, regarding Easter and Easter Monday, again, if an individual is Catholic, and that falling on that particular day as well. But again, there's Q posts that openly say that people are not going to get away with what they've gotten away with, and that they will be caught and they will be held accountable. But it's not that the public is going to find out everything that they've done publicly all of the time. They might just flat out disappear. They might just pass away, quote unquote, and people will say it's because of course, bad health, which we know he was in bad health. But even so, he was wrapped up in some of the worst things imaginable. I'm pretty certain of that. Of course, he came onto the scene as being a rather progressive pope, and he was joked about on a constant basis on late night talk shows and a number of other things. Again, some of their comedic staff members would dress up like the Pope, riding a motorcycle across the stage and waving a rainbow flag and all this other nonsense. And, they would just make a joke out of it without understanding the real ramifications of his influence over the sheep that follow him. And that, of course, became a massive problem, too. So, anyway, good riddance as far as I'm concerned to bad rubbish. He was not one of the good people and certainly hasn't been. So there's that. Now, there was also this, and this is kind of important, and I think there's more to this than what meets the eye. You may recall here, just within, again, the last few days, that an individual by the name of Dan Caldwell was working under Pete Hegseth, and in fact, he was one of the communications directors for Pete Hegseth and working right alongside of him in the Pentagon, along with two other individuals. As it turns out, the media and even the Gateway Pundit, claiming again to be a conservative news outlet, openly again published this particular story as if to say that these three individuals, and certainly Dan Caldwell, were leakers of, again, classified information. As it turns out, none of that is true. Dan Caldwell and these two individuals who also worked, again, right alongside Pete Hegseth, these individuals knew each other for quite some time. I would say at least a decade. And as it turns out, Tucker Carlson just talked with Dan Caldwell in his most recent episode, and I watched it, and it's fantastic. It's an excellent interview. This is without a doubt an individual, again, who is very knowledgeable, very patriotic, loves America, loves his job, is loyal to ethical human beings, and at no point released classified information. None of his technology was confiscated. He wasn't searched. None of that took place. He was just led out of the building. But in his discussion with Tucker, he openly talks about how Susan Rice and other individuals, at least a few other individuals, still again have access to Pentagon security documents. Even though, again, they're not in the building on a day in and day out basis, clocking in and clocking out, they still have access to these documents, and they shouldn't. Because clearly they worked for previous administrations, Obama's administration and then Biden's fake administration. So the question that doesn't get answered nor asked in the interview with Tucker is, where was Pete Hegseth in all of this? Why didn't Pete Hegseth say, wait a minute, I know these guys. There's no way that they would do something like this and release classified information, so what the hell is going on? Again, this is where it gets real confusing and it gets real dicey, because Pete Hegseth, he's bent the knee to Israel. And he could very well be very blackmailed by Israel, as if to say, again, you're going to cut these guys loose or else. I mean, that's possible. We know that blackmail is their tool. That's the thing that the enemy uses all of the time against very good people, if they can be blackmailed. But these three guys that were let go, again, Dan Caldwell himself makes no reference to Pete Hegseth actually being the person who cut him loose. Or even, again, saying anything to Dan Caldwell himself from Pete Hegseth, as if to say, here's why we're letting you go. There's no communication back and forth regarding any of that, certainly not on the record with Tucker Carlson's interview, but I highly recommend watching it. It's very well done, and again, this is a very patriotic guy. He's anti-war. There's no doubt about that. He describes the entire military-industrial complex. He describes the Middle East in such a simplistic way that anybody could understand what's going on over there and why things are happening the way that they're happening. and how more chaos in the Middle East would be the worst thing, in particular for U.S. soldiers and diplomats and even family members who are just over there, again, with all of their other family members who are enlisted or working with the government, that these will be the people who will be in harm's way if some conflict were to kick off. So, again, this is where even the lines get blurred between the mainstream media on the left, which we're all stereotypically aware of, so to speak, but also on the right, and how they both get this particular story wrong. But then you have someone like a Tucker Carlson who comes in there and goes, you know what, I'm going to talk to the guy because the guy has a story to tell, and let's hear it. Let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth and see what's up. And again, Tucker does a great job. And when you get done listening to it, there's just no indication, not to me anyway, that this guy was guilty of absolutely anything, because again, at no point was any of his information actually confiscated from him. And again, he was openly asked by Tucker, did you take a polygraph? And he goes, no, they didn't even offer one. He goes, well, did they take your cell phone, your computer, or anything? He goes, nope, never. Then he goes, did you share classified information? He goes, I've never shared classified information. And then that's it. They just let him out of the building and whatever. And again, at the end of the interview, Dan Caldwell looks at Tucker and goes, if you want to look for a leaker, you might want to start with Susan Rice. You might want to start with the people around Susan Rice who still have access to this kind of information. So it makes you wonder again, did they purposefully, again, I'm thinking about this multidimensionally, did they purposefully hang Dan Caldwell and these other two guys out on a limb on purpose and pull them out of the building on purpose in order to, again, find out who exactly was doing the leaking? I mean, that's possible, only to then, of course, bring them back at a later date and do whatever. But Dan Caldwell, again, is a very solid dude. He talks about his experience with Pete Hegseth. He was instrumental in his Senate Judiciary testimony and working alongside of him, to craft his speech and a number of other things. And again, he's just a solid dude. He seems like a very solid guy. So I highly recommend watching that particular interview because, again, I personally found it very interesting. And like I said, the way he explains the Middle East is he does it with a level of knowledge and a level of ease that's absolutely amazing that I think anybody could understand. So again, I highly recommend checking that out. Okay, let me move on to this very quickly, and then I'm going to wrap up the geopolitical stuff. Again, I know there's a ton happening right now, lots of ins and outs. A lot of coded language, and again, just a lot of movement. It's almost too much to keep track of. But there's a local issue I've been working with here, again, regarding education issues, which has sort of taken my focus away from some geopolitical things. But it's a very important education issue, which I'll bring up here in just a little bit in this episode and play some audio associated with it also. But first of all, last week, 4chan, one of the chat boards, anonymous chat boards, was basically taken down allegedly from the inside and so-called hacked, quote unquote. Although it wasn't really hacked, it was just shut down from, again, probably somebody on the inside. Either way, before that happened, there was a particular post that was made 24 hours before 4chan went down. And it was removed multiple times by the moderators of that particular page. And I wanted to read it to you. And then again, sort of their wrap up as to what they thought happened with the actual post. So here's what it said. Again, this shouldn't necessarily surprise the listeners of this show, but it's educational nonetheless. It said the following, quote, Antifa is a U.S. government psyop. As are most of the right-wing grifter podcast set, as are most of the left-wing independent news outlets, quote unquote. The United States is certainly managed by the intelligence agencies through NGO cutouts. It says, remember when J6 was set up? What do you think was done to the organic supporters of Antifa? Remember watching the left protest at a CNN building? Wasn't spread around too much. What they do is use things called I/O operations, which are propaganda funnels to rope in retards through sundry social media platform groups like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Then they organize these events. NGO mercenaries hired protesters dressed as both left-wing and right-wing people, then are photo-opped attacking each other. The material is sent out to the different info silos to farm outrage, clicks, engagement, and the data from those is used to profile where people are along the radicalization process. Can we get them out to a protest? Can we get them to donate? Can we get them to perform radical actions like advanced protest tactics? It says the most promising candidates are the algorithmically identified and automatically sent more extreme content, up to and including short clips and videos and posts instructing them to protest tactics. Rinse and repeat. It says you'll never meet a real nationalist. You'll never meet a real Antifa either. Certainly not out on the streets is what they're implying. It says, so how do I know? Because I worked as a private contractor building and maintaining the I/O funnel and software to support it. They said most of the news is scripted with direct oversight by companies hired by the CIA, down to individual shows like John Oliver's, not even his real name, which my employer was contacted to make suggested script changes to. For example, they said this is a cutout of the State Department under CIA purview, and they link the Gateway Pundit as being one of those outlets. Then it says, and this, an Antifa blog, was funded by a green group started by an NGO funded through USAID, and they include the link for that also. Scenes.noblogs.org. It says scenes from the Atlanta forest, apparently. It says between 2018 and 2019, I built this funnel for a left-wing NGO where they asked me to determine, quote, how the GOP might cheat and steal the election and what that would look like, unquote. Only for me to watch as this very funnel was implemented by the left to steal the election. Most of the alt news, quote unquote, on both the left and the right, the journalists, are all affiliates of the CIA. A lot of the political infighting in Congress and the Senate is stage managed. It says most of the violence at protests on both sides are small groups and goes under the handbook by the term street theater, quote unquote. You're living in a dream world. Your government and virtually every news event you see or read about is fake. And then again, what happened regarding that post, it says the post was removed no less than 3 times by the mods. After the 3rd time, less than 24 hours later, 4chan was taken down. The takedown was an inside job. And what was also, of course, realized was that the vast majority of the IP addresses to 4chan came from Israel, with the United States being second in line when it came to the most IP addresses. So yeah, again, I don't think that shocks the listeners of this audience. We've been over this before. The CIA's between and behind all of this. They certainly have for many, many years. What you see on your TV is not real. And again, a person can basically only figure out what the truth is if they read and reference accurate history, and then they look at what's going on now, and they can read between the lines. And that's a difficult task, again, for somebody who doesn't know what they're looking at face value. It's not to say that some stories that aren't in the news are real. They certainly are. The murder of somebody by an illegal alien, that's most likely legit. We know that school shootings tend to be fake. Certainly the Florida State shooting certainly seemed to be fake. There's even audio, again, that proves that, which I'll play here in just a second, where, again, they were openly saying on MSNBC that there was a drill happening the exact same day. I think that's, frankly, a good transition to the education topics here, but that right there, again, should prove the point that what you think you're seeing is just staged outrage, and it's a script, and it's not real. It is designed to shift policy, in particular working environments. It's designed, again, to find protesters, to manipulate human beings, socially engineer them, and the list is endless. And people end up making horrible, horrible decisions based on lies without having all of the facts at their disposal. So let me get into that now regarding the, again, so-called Florida State school shooting that happened there at Florida State University. They were running a drill that same day. Again, that should be evident. And as I've said in the past, one of the ways that you can just visually figure out that it's a drill, as opposed to potentially a real shooting, is they immediately have a helicopter in the sky. They immediately have fire trucks when you wouldn't normally have fire trucks because, let's face it, there's no fire. But when you have an overabundance of all of these vehicles and an overabundance of people just randomly standing around, more times than not, it's a drill. And unfortunately, the media is allowed to lie to us over the television, radio, and through other outlets. And that happens all of the time. So again, around midday, I think it was around 1:32 Eastern Standard Time, the day that this took place, which was April 17th, you had MSNBC and their list of nitwit guests, and they openly bring up the fact that there was a drill happening. And then they say, well, we don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but we understand how it could confuse people and blah, blah, blah. Again, you're talking about CIA-connected individuals running a false psyop story on the public as if something happened when it didn't. Allegedly, the only two people who died, if they in fact died, were food service workers. Older individuals, two older males who happened to be food service workers. And yet, there was a video that was released, which I put up on my X page and even, I believe, on Gab, which showed what appeared to be an overweight white female on the ground with what appeared to be blood on her backside, basically on her rear end, while another student is casually walking past her filming this as the student is drinking a cup of Starbucks coffee. Doesn't stop to help the person, doesn't stop to see if they're alive or dead or if they need assistance, nothing. They just, again, are recording and just casually walking past. They're not even running past the person. Is that a normal human response? When you see somebody who is allegedly really dead in a grass field right next to a sidewalk, or do you stop immediately and help them? Or are you filming because you know it's a drill, and you're maybe one of the crisis actors and you're just filming the scene? See, this is how easy it is to manipulate people. So give this audio listen from MSNBC. Again, the title at the bottom of the screen was "At least one person dead after shooting," and they allegedly arrested some white kid, who, I don't know, was in the parking garage taking shots of people, allegedly. But as we know, even from Q drops, they pull some of these people if a real shooting actually takes place or they want to blame somebody. They pull somebody from a mental institution, and by they, I mean the CIA, FBI, etc., and then they give them a gun, maybe even with blanks in it, and they have them pull the trigger and shoot at a crowd of people, and then people panic, and then they arrest the person, and then that's it. The person who's actually done the shooting believes that they've actually hit somebody when in fact they haven't. I mean, wrap your head around that level of manipulation, but that happens, ladies and gentlemen. That is a thing. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Alexander, you were just looking at some new information, Emily, that there was some training that was scheduled to go on today.
Yeah, they were given a heads up, basically, that there's this tactical training that would be happening near campus at some point during the day.
Students were given a heads up?
They were, and students actually pointed us to this alert from the police department, basically warning you may hear loud bangs, crashes, sirens, and see officers with firearms display. So we don't know if that's coincidence or if there was any kind of thought into it, but certainly raising questions and speculation around the timing of this incident overlapping with that planned tactical.
Well, the obvious question it might raise is if, when you know that there's going to be some training, Chris, do you think that that's what's going on? If someone is saying to you, we have a situation.
Yeah, it certainly could have given the students and staff a little pause to react to initial calls that there was an active shooter if they were conditioned that there was probably going to be a training exercise, which is unfortunate and untimely. But back to what Catherine was highlighting.
The clip ends there. Again, my point here is simple. There are no coincidences. They don't exist. There is only evidence. The simple fact that, again, they would make mention of that there was a drill occurring, is because, again, there's too much public information that's out there that proves such a thing. Too many students would have to be alerted to this. Too many players would have to know. Not to mention, when there's drills taking place, they have crisis actors who literally get paid to, again, play dead. They'll rub blood on themselves, they'll be on the ground, and then they run these drills with student and staff participation, and then the news runs with it like it actually happens when in fact it doesn't. And then, of course, they follow it up with a stereotypical vigil where they have, again, students standing around holding a candle, or students all gathering in one spot, not knowing anybody who actually got shot, if anybody got shot at all, and they're all just standing there on camera, looking in a general direction where there are flowers on the ground and, XYZ, and it's all just a stage. Again, the whole thing is just a giant stage. So until this starts being criminalized, this fraud, and until this, again, ceases to exist, this will continue to happen. But again, they always give themselves away because of little slip-ups like that. Whoops, there was a drill on the same day. What are the odds? Again, it's laughable, but it's scary because this is the level of deception and the level of evil that exists among human beings who exist here on Earth. That they have no problem manipulating and faking death in order to get you to believe that there was death when in fact there wasn't. And of course, what does this lead to? Well, this is where it gets worse. This is where, of course, as you would expect, and I've brought up on the show endless times, and even written about, this is exactly what leads to policy change and technological constraints in implementation. The very next day, the next morning, I decided to turn on Fox and Friends to see what the CIA response would be to all of this. And here's what happened. You can't make this up. There was a guy they had two guests on to speak about this issue. Neither one of these individuals can speak about this issue. In fact, I don't think it can possibly get any more hinky as to who was actually being invited on Fox and Friends on Fox News to discuss this. The first person, can't make this up, was an old actor from the show The Sopranos. Like he has anything to do with this or would have any experience in this. It was outrageous. And the second was an individual who works for and is the CEO, if I'm not mistaken, of a technological group called Expose. That's letter X and then SPOUSE. Expose is a technological tool that gets used within schools where all of the teachers, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself on this, because again, if teachers are asked to wear any more tchotchkes around their neck, they'll be dragging it like a ball and chain on the ground. But it's another wireless electronic device that they wear around their neck that allows them to basically scan in and scan out of their classroom, but also know the whereabouts of their students. And it's this giant monitor that sits inside of their classroom that, again, basically scans the faces and devices of teachers and students to then, again, monitor their whereabouts. I think I said it again in the previous episode for Friday that all of these tools are proven to not stop violence. They are not preventative measures. Even X's AI platform, Grok, openly admits time and time again, if you ask it the very basic question, are American schools reactive or proactive? The answer that always pops back is they are by and large reactive. And one of the ways you figure that out is because of the policy that they implement after the fact, which is the definition of reactive. If they were proactive, they'd be teaching people about the truth. And they'd be teaching them about this social engineering and all of this manipulation and the technocratic state that's being built around them as if it's normal when clearly it's not. The homeschooling families don't, of course, have to deal with any of this, and everybody knows that. But these technology tools, again, are adopted by schools, usually because the creator lives in the general area. Let me give you an example. Remember that Georgia shooting that took place where the kid showed up with a rifle? Nobody saw him bring a rifle in. It was in his backpack. My apologies, the guy's name has slipped my mind. His dad was arrested and actually charged with something like the dad did something wrong. He allegedly shot a couple of people, and then that was the end of it. Well, that school had all of these technology pieces in place to so-called prevent something from happening. And it didn't prevent anything. In fact, the company that they had adopted beforehand was the company Centegix. Just so happened Centegix was also based out of Georgia, right down the road. So again, what are the odds that they would be using the school again to promote their own security platform that was actually used in real time during an alleged shooting, which proved that the program doesn't actually prevent anything? Again, this happens time and time again. But people can't read between the lines because they get over emotional. They see the story and they blindly believe it, and then they blindly adopt new policy, or they double down on their already existing policy and say, well, we have safety and security measures put in place, and we're okay and everything is fine just the way that it is. It's a con game. The whole thing is a con game. And it's overwhelming at the depth of the con. But people have to figure this out because the evidence is right in front of everybody's face. Again, if they know where to look. Okay, let me play this too. Again, this is also sort of geopolitically based, but this is something that's happening across the nation. In fact, it's happening so frequently, I can't even keep track. There are American K-12 schools and universities all over the United States who are doing what I said they do, which is digging in like ticks, specifically when it comes to the DEI policy. This was sent to me by Cicely from New Mexico, and now you have Dayton, Ohio, just north of me, who are joining others across the country by refusing to get rid of their diversity, equity, and inclusion instruction in the classroom. Which means now they're going to be sued by the federal government and probably lose federal funding. Again, as far as Dayton Public Schools is concerned, you're talking about upwards of $50 million. But they're doing this again because why? Well, they're majority minority students, number one. Number two, they bought into the social engineering CIA operation of diversity, equity, and inclusion, quote unquote, which they don't even know is a civil rights violation. I mean, the irony is astounding that when you exclude whites, Asians, or even Hispanics from your schools, or even just one group of individuals, you're engaging in a civil rights violation. But again, they're political ideologues, and they've been manipulated by government, and they work in government, and they don't understand the depth of the manipulation, which again causes them to double down on their stupidity. So here's a clip again from WDTN.com, Channel 2 News out of NBC. Give them a listen in 3, 2, 1.
To 2 News at 11. First tonight, Dayton Public Schools are joining others across the country, refusing to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom.
The White House sent a notice on April 3rd banning DEI programs from schools. Those who refuse could face consequences. And 2 News reporter Evan Bales is live in the newsroom with more on what this means for DPS.
Look, Jack, Dayton Public Schools is joining other institutions that are pushing back against the Trump administration. Here's what local administrators have to say.
Today is standing up against what would require us to not care equally for our children.
That was part of the DPS board's response to this notice sent by the Trump administration earlier this month. This was sent to every school in the nation to confirm that they're in compliance with getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusivity initiatives.
Treasurer, may we have a vote?
The board voted unanimously, adopting a resolution to reject the notice.
We value education as a whole, and it has always been the window to whatever life that you choose to live for yourself.
But this decision does not come without potential consequences. The notice Trump's administration sent out also says that the school or district can be sued by the federal government and have their federal funding withheld. For Dayton Public Schools, $50 million hangs in the balance. And for some Dayton families, that can make a big change for their kids.
I think it's insane because the kids with disabilities also need the same equal opportunities that the kids that don't have disabilities get.
Jessica's grandson has autism and her granddaughter has an IEP for speech. In many cases, when funding dries up, programs for kids with disabilities are often the first to go.
I feel sorry for my grandkids in the future because look at what we're seeing now. People are going to get really angry and it's, it'll be what it'll be, but come on now, we're better than this. We're supposed to be great again. Don't take it away from these kids because these kids, they need it.
Now, this notice was sent out weeks ago on April 3rd, and the Ohio Department of Education has requested that all schools and districts in the state have theirs signed by Friday, April 18th. In the newsroom, Evan Bales, 2 News.
It's worth mentioning, I think. The board member who was speaking on behalf of the Dayton public school system was wearing a mask on her face. So, there you go. Again, talk about falling for psychological operations and being manipulated. They're still wearing a mask on their face. It's 2025. Again, what is wrong with these people? But this is the problem. And again, all of these lies about, they're going to lose all this funding for handicapped kids. That's not it. That isn't going to happen. Not to mention the blame shifting. Look how, again, they blame the federal government for actually following the law and not realizing that the DEI policies are against the Civil Rights Act and violate the Civil Rights Act. But they believe it. Again, they believe that quote-unquote diversity, equity, and inclusion is a real thing. Well, it's already enshrined in the Civil Rights Act. It's just been repackaged. And it was repackaged to manipulate the masses into not knowing, of course, what their rights were in the first place, and then basically say, well, we're going to repackage this as this new name. So if anybody says that they are against this name, then you can call them a racist, or you can call them whatever other name you want to call them. And say, well, you're going to take all our rights away, and you're going to take our money away, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and you hate minority handicapped students and all this other stuff. It's just one lie after another. But they're falling for it, and now it's going to cost their district money, and they're going to blame the federal government, at least the gullible public will, when in fact the only people that they should blame are school board members. So again, if something gets lost, that's the school board's problem. That's the school board's fault. Now, this is a nice segue into 2 particular school districts that I bring up on the show with regularity. The first is Westerville City Schools in Central Ohio. Let me review this school district again very quickly for the listeners, in case, again, you've either forgotten or you're unaware. Westerville City Schools is in the top 10 school districts as far as size is concerned in the entire state of Ohio. Before the last election, before last November of 2024, a handful of Marxist nitwits came to the school board meeting, one of the school board meetings, and started to complain about LifeWise, being again a Christian right to religious instruction program that exists throughout the state of Ohio and in fact exists across the nation. As a result of their constant complaining and their whining, and the all-female board fully interested in, again, giving the squeaky wheel the grease, long story short, one of their board members ended up resigning for unrelated reasons. They replaced said board member with a Muslim female. While the Muslim female, in the same meeting that she was sworn in, the rest of the board voted to get rid of LifeWise. In the middle of all of that, they were asking for a school levy. All of this was happening before November. So they actually believed that getting rid of a Christian program in a predominantly white Christian city in Ohio would be a good idea for apparently accepting their school levy. I don't know why they thought that. It was proven to basically be the nail in their coffin, because of course they were saying, well, if we don't get the levy, then we're not going to have enough money to pay the people that we need to pay, and we're going to have to make cuts, and we don't want to do that. And they just started threatening everybody. But in the middle of all of that, they got rid of a very popular Christian program. And right to religious instruction is something that exists in the state of Ohio, which again was later signed into law shortly after their vote where again, Mike DeWine said, yes, this is state law. Schools have to offer right to religious instruction no matter what. They can determine the amount of time in which it takes place, but they still have to offer it. So long story short, they got rid of LifeWise, pissed off everybody. Their levy failed. They got upset about that. They moved some money around that they were lying about, saying that they couldn't move $30 million over here into the general fund from the private fund because of XYZ, when all of that was a lie. And then, in the most recent school board meeting, they actually fired 50 people. So from the moment that the LifeWise conversation started to take place to right now, on today's calendar, 2 school board members resigned. They filled them in with 2 other individuals, one being a Muslim female, a black Muslim female, and the other now, for again, the latest school board member who resigned, her name was Tracy Davidson. They got rid of her and they replaced her with a gay male. I assume he's gay. He's flamboyant, so, it's the best guess I can take. Either way, this again, they hired an individual who is, of course, a district sycophant who will believe and vote with and in line and in lockstep with everybody else who's on that board. And then at the end of the board meeting, they made a couple of votes. One was to continue to postpone the reintroduction of LifeWise, which they're clearly doing this to run out the clock for the remainder of the school year, because then they won't have to entertain LifeWise for the remainder of the school year until, of course, after the summer. So it'll probably be sometime during the summer when, of course, by Ohio state law now, they'll have to reintroduce LifeWise, which they don't want to do because it makes them look like idiots, because they got rid of it for no reason whatsoever, just because a couple of lesbian Marxists started screaming at the top of their lungs. So as a result of all of that now, they, of course, were forced to fire 50 people within their own school district to make ends meet because their levy didn't pass. Again, this is the stupidity of these people. They do not understand nor think one move ahead, that the decision that they make regarding one thing is going to have consequences, and that the consequences of that move are going to impact other things that they are seeking to adopt or enjoy, and it ends up just blowing the whole thing apart. And in the middle of all of it, what you end up always getting, without the help of the public and the innocent public, they get to just stand back and watch all this happen if they want to. But these places literally self-implode on themselves all of the time, while also creating a division among the so-called supporters of the district, to where the supporters of the district end up hating the district officials because of the bad decisions that the district officials end up doing that end up hurting everybody. So you can't please both sides no matter what. But you also, of course, can't please everybody, let alone one side over the other, is basically what I'm trying to say. It's divide and conquer without having to help them. They'll just do it on their own. So again, at the end of the last board meeting, and I want to play the audio because I want you to hear this, the board president, Christy Meyer, starts sobbing. She's crying out loud because they've had to fire now 50 people, most of which are English as a second language instructors and instructional aides and things of that nature in order, again, to save money. Now, what are they not getting rid of? They're not getting rid of sports programs. They're not getting rid of clubs. They're not getting rid of administrators. They're not taking pay cuts. They're not getting rid of the things that they could get rid of if classroom instruction was really the thing that they cared about, which clearly it's not. So they get rid of translators for individuals who don't speak English. They get rid of instructional aides for people who provide, again, extra tutelage or extra instruction and help along with students who allegedly need this extra help. And then they cry about it, making it sound like it's a problem of the public's decision to not have a levy on the ballot, when in fact it's their own asinine decisions that led to this in the first place, and their inability to manage the books. And while all of that is happening, you quite literally have school board members jumping ship and resigning before their terms are up in order to have their positions refilled in by equally foolish individuals while everybody watches all of this take place, while everybody eats the school board alive. And the board president thinks that what? That sobbing over having to fire 50 people somehow removes her from any kind of guilt in this entire process. It's a multi-million-dollar corporation. School districts are multi-million-dollar corporations. Cutting people loose is the easiest thing you have to do. It's not that hard. It really isn't. You pull the person aside and you say, "We're sorry, we're cutting you loose. We have to make ends meet." But what you do, in all honesty, before you do that, is you say, "Here are all the moves and all the cuts that we've also made. And we want you to know that this is impacting everybody, not just you," but it's typically the way that it works is that, of course, the individuals at the bottom are the ones who get cut loose first. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that they're having a hard time finding bus drivers, food service workers, custodians, et cetera, et cetera. And now, of course, they're not hiring any more aides, instructional aides, because they just fired 50 of them. 50. So here's Christy Meyer sobbing over this like an over-emotional human being, not knowing how to run a multi-million-dollar corporation. Because let's face it, these people get on these school boards out of feelings. They think that just because they're a mother of a student, that they can sit on a multi-million-dollar board of a corporation and know how to run it. It's the dumbest thing on the face of the planet. But again, they think that we're all in this together and it takes a village. No, it doesn't. It takes competent people. And if you don't have competent people, well, you're going to go down with a ship. So here's Christy Meyer at the end of the Westerville City School Board meeting this past week, sobbing her brains out in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I did just want to say one last thing. I'm going to echo my colleagues. None of this was easy. And I will just many times I stayed up at night thinking about the impacts of this. So this is not you feeling. I'm sorry, but it really irritates me. This has happened. And so I agree, contact and make it known. Sorry. It really makes me mad. I'm a crier when I'm mad and happy and sad. So there you go.
Again, my apologies for the short clip and the bad audio. The bad audio was on them. In fact, they openly said it at the board meeting. They didn't have any of their stuff set up properly. Anyway, here's why I hone in on this. I'm not honing in on this to pick on her. I'm honing in on this because crying in a professional setting is remarkably unprofessional. She's the board president of a school board, and she's openly saying, I wasn't going to cry. This is what keeps me up at night, and these are hard decisions, and we don't want to make them, and they just cry and they sob. It's not, again, this is their doing. They, of course, blame government. They deflect, they scapegoat, they rationalize their own involvement. They don't think they're to blame for anything. They bought the whole COVID lie. Again, they participated in the largest money laundering operation with the ESSER funds and CARES Act that's ever existed in the history of American K-12 education. They think COVID's real. They still believe this. This is still a thing that they fall for. They're all injected. They're all sick all the time. They go, "Sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting. I had COVID." No, you didn't. You've taken 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots. You've wiped out your immune system. That's why you're sick all year long. That's why you're coughing all the time. Again, you can't follow these people and trust these people if emotion is their first and foremost application in a working environment. There's no logic there. I've been over this before when it comes to the parts of the brain. When the emotional part of the brain takes over, the frontal cortex shuts down, and the frontal cortex is where logic remains. It's where logic sits. It's where critical thinking occurs. But if your amygdala and hypothalamus are overreacting because you're crying about spilled milk and the fact that, again, you had to fire people as a part of a multi-million-dollar corporation when the budget gets tight, hello? That's like crying over tying your shoes after you trip because your shoes are untied. It's the thing you do. But you don't cry about it. You just do it. So these people who are unqualified for these positions and aren't willing to make tough moves and tough decisions, which aren't tough at all, they call them tough and hard moves, but they're really not. That's their excuse. That's the rationalization. And then, of course, they blame the public. And they say, well, a levy didn't pass. It's your fault. No, it's not the public's fault. Maybe the public is more in tune with what's going on. Maybe they see prices increasing, inflation remaining stagnant or dropping now, hopefully, thank God. But even so, this is the issue. Not to mention they never ask nor answer the sole question that has to be asked and answered. Why is it that more people are leaving, and why is it that states, in particular the state of Ohio, now has law on the books regarding vouchers and increasing vouchers and increasing school choice? They will never ask nor answer the question, and if you told them the answer on a silver platter for free, they would tip the platter over in your face and walk away. They won't change anything that they do. They won't become more objective learning environments. They won't get rid of all of the indoctrination because they don't even know what it is. And you can't fix a problem when you don't even know what the problem is or who's perpetuating the problem. And that's it. They'll never fix it because they don't want the answer. Because the answer requires them to self-reflect and comprehend on a level that they are incapable of doing. That's why it's a failing business. That's why they're tuning violins on the Titanic. And what is their answer? Their answer and response to the state of Ohio taking money away from them as a school district, big and small, all over the state and even all over the nation, one state at a time. Their solution is you need to pound the pavement at the State House and testify and yell about how we need money as a public education system. No, that isn't going to solve the problem either. In fact, all it's going to do is highlight your inability to grasp reality. And all it's going to do is show that to these politicians. They're going to see it firsthand. You're going to be crying. You're going to be screaming. You're going to dress up in your pink hair and your rainbow flag t-shirt. And before you know it, they're just going to look at you and say, okay, thank you for your time. Next. Thank you for your time. Next. And those politicians are just going to move forward because these politicians don't want to invest money in a failing business. They're not going to waste taxpayer dollars, even though they do it all the time. But they don't want to waste taxpayer dollars on this ever-failing business that is not improving. It's an American right for every American to have the ability to educate their own children on their own dime without it being stolen from them any way that they see fit. Period. And one of the last excuses, of course, that public schools use is they say, well, what about the handicapped? What about the minorities? What about this and that? As if the handicapped or minority students can't self-learn. So you talk about setting the bar low. Nobody does it like an American K-12 school. They set the bar so low that the individuals who come up to the bar don't know that all they have to do is literally just step over it and they don't even have to take a full step. It's not that tough. But again, they insult everybody in the entire process by setting the bar so low and then claiming that they can never raise the bar because people will be left out. People will be excluded if they raise the bar of expectations. It's a level of, again, it's a level of brainwashing that is boiling over now. And it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse because their answer is a politically driven collective answer. It's not an objective one. Like I said earlier, if you told them the answer and you gave it to them for free on a silver platter, they'd spit in your face, tip the platter over, and walk away. They don't want to hear it. Which means a business that doesn't want to learn, ironically enough, the education business, quote unquote, are they really educating anybody? Or are they just digging their heels in on their own false beliefs? That's not a successful business model. I've been over that a million times and brought up numerous examples as to why that's the case. And that's just the way that it's going to continue to be. Which leads me now to the local issue that I've been keeping close to the vest until last week when I unleashed 4 Substacks. The first Substack I unleashed was titled Using AI Against K-12 School Officials, How to Rapidly Learn Policy and the Law in Order to Hold the Guilty Accountable. I recommend giving that a read if you haven't. The next one was titled Google Workspace in K-12 Schools, Talawanda City Schools' Misuse of Private Information and the Cover-Up that Followed. This is a damning one. And I'm going to get into this more specifically, but the next one I wrote was The Administrative Targeting of K-12 Students and Parents, How School Districts Blackmail, Intimidate, and Deflect Blame from the Guilty to the Innocent. And then the most recent one, which I just published on Monday, it was titled Those Who Scream the Loudest, Those Who Scream the Loudest, How 4 Talawanda School Board members exposed their own malfeasance. And this specifically had to do with last Thursday's board meeting where I also spoke. Now let me go back to this. Let me go back and revisit this entire Google Workspace fiasco that's happened here in this town. Back in December of 2024, parents brought it to the attention of Scotty King and his wife, Dawn King, who is a board member, that the district's Google Calendar system for many of their employees, including administrators, was wide open. And that all you needed was, again, a district email in order to access all of the documentation associated with all of these calendars, including IEPs, 504s, and again, any other disciplinary hearing or personal meeting or what have you that took place between employees and coworkers. All of this is supposed to be private all of the time. That should go without saying. Unless, of course, and I'm theorizing here as I do in one of these articles, what if the system was purposefully left open? What if it was left open by the superintendent and or board members in order to monitor one another's doings, whereabouts, meetings, conversations, etc., etc.? In a working environment, you would do that because you want leverage. It's an unprofessional way of doing things, clearly, but you would do it because you want leverage over the people below you, to some extent. Point being, and with that aside, they got caught. And at the direction of her own legal counsel, board member Dawn King was told, don't bring this to the board, just bring it to the public. And see how the board responds and see how the board reacts. And that's exactly what happened. Parents sent me screenshots that proved that, in fact, they could access this information that was widely available, that was supposed to be private. It was a couple of haphazard meetings and a blank IEP form. So I posted that online, and other parents again contacted me and they said, Sean, here's the exact steps to take in order to see these documents so that other parents can prove to themselves and their children that this kind of stuff is open because parents need to know about this. Now again, why would somebody go to a singular board member and tell them about this along with her husband as opposed to the superintendent and the rest of the board? Simple, because they don't trust them. Because there's a pattern of conflict resolution that is unprofessional among the other board members and the superintendent in an effort to blame individuals, innocent individuals, for their own wrongdoing as a school district. Or the school district would again take credit for something that they actually screwed up in the first place, and they would spin the story to make it look like they were actually the saviors of something when in fact they weren't. They were actually the cause of the problem. Let me give you a quick example. This is one of the examples that was brought up in a previous board meeting many months ago, almost a year ago, if memory serves. And I brought it up again in one of the Substack articles. Board member Dawn King, who is clearly ethical and knows exactly what she's doing because she's read the policy, where it clearly states again that board members have the right role and responsibility to look at any and all technological pieces that exist within the district along with paperwork to assure compliance. That's what they're supposed to do. They, of course, didn't do that, but she did. As a result of all of that, but beforehand, there was an issue regarding the emergency button that gets pressed in the main office of one of the elementary schools. Apparently, the way that it works is if there is some kind of a break-in or there's a violent breakout or a school shooting or a fire or what have you, there is a singular button that gets pressed in the main office under a desk. I assume the main office desk, I'm guessing. But the button gets pressed and it alerts the sheriff's department in Butler County, Ohio, that there is a problem at this building. Dawn King and others, along with, again, there were no other school officials there. It was her, to my recollection, her staff members and sheriff's deputies, that the button did not work. They tested the button, it didn't work. The sheriff's department showed up, they verified that it didn't work, and then they sought to fix it. Then in a follow-up board meeting, after that transpired and after that got fixed, Dawn King brought this up in a school board meeting. And she said the button didn't work, it's now been fixed. I hope every other button in every other building works because this one didn't and they all should work. That was a good move. That's exactly what she should have done. And she did that. That's beyond evident. The problem is that for individuals who like to scapegoat and individuals who like to deflect responsibility onto others and deflect blame and move that around and rationalize their own, inability to recognize a problem, let alone solve one. The superintendent actually called her a liar in the board meeting and said, well, that he hadn't heard that and that the sheriff's department didn't tell him anything about the button not working. And she said, I just told you. And that's exactly what happened, and the sheriff's department verified it. And then at the time, the now resigned board member David Bothist even jumped all over Dawn King and said, why would you bring that up? Because that's a school safety issue, and you shouldn't bring that up publicly. That should remain private. No, it shouldn't. Again, think about the privacy of that situation. Everybody is a taxpayer. Everybody has the right and role and responsibility to figure out and know if a particular system doesn't work, or if it does work. And if it doesn't work and it gets fixed, good. It means that you've been screwing up the entire time, from the moment that it stopped working, whenever that took place, to the moment when it actually started to work again and the problem got caught and then fixed. You would think again that there would just be a simple thank you. That wasn't their response. Point being, they have a pattern of behavior that is indicative of individuals that are not interested in the truth, let alone the public knowing the truth. Now, does it shock people that American K-12 schools and the people who work within are secretive? It shouldn't be, not at this point, not at this stage of the game. It's organized crime. But I've called it disorganized crime, because it is disorganized. It's illegal, it's sneaky, it's dirty, the way that they typically operate, and they keep things from the public. You wouldn't believe the things that American K-12 schools keep from the public, but you're smart people. You can take a pretty good guess. It's some heinous, heinous stuff. So regarding the Google fiasco, this was figured out again by parents, brought to the attention of the Kings. The Kings brought it to the attention of the public. And parents brought it to my attention, and then I posted it online because, of course, everybody knew that the district was going to come after parents, students, and possibly Dawn King. They were all aware of this. They said if we bring this to them privately, they're going to come after us as if we had something to do with their open system. they're not responsible for the system being open. That's a school superintendent problem. And this system has been open since its adoption, at least or approximately 2018. Now, here's where it gets worse. Not only was all of this brought to their attention as a school district in December, specifically rather on December 19th, but immediately after they went into cleanup mode. And then they went into deflection mode and rationalization mode and scapegoating mode. And they sought to frame Dawn King for wrongdoing. When in fact she followed her own policy, the district policy, which again gives her access to all of the documents, technology, and she can view whatever she wants to look for compliance anytime she wants. They keep lying about that. It keeps getting published, and then they keep doubling down on that lie. And then at the exact same time, the school district came after parents and students who logged in to verify that the system was in fact open. Not taking responsibility, albeit privately, in private emails back and forth to the public, specific parents whose information was accessed, or to other employees. But they never apologize publicly in a board meeting. They just blame, because they know that people watch these board meetings and they'll just blindly believe it. Which now leads us, of course, to the most recent nonsense, which had to do with this surefire investigation, where again, immediately the school board hired a cybersecurity firm through their own insurance company's law firm to look into how exactly this information was accessed and who accessed this information. In that report, the Surefire report calls me, Sean Brooks, a concerned citizen for posting it online. It doesn't mention me by name, but again, as you'll hear me say in my speech to the board, it was me, and I don't deny that, and I wasn't even hiding that. If you clicked on that Facebook account that I had at the time, it took you to the main page and said, this is the page of Dr. Sean Brooks. It wasn't a secret. My handle was John Adams. It was, I like John Adams, the president. But either way, it wasn't a secret. But with that said, this is again where individuals show their biases and they show who they're, again, interested in blaming. They're interested in blaming the people who figured out the problem, not the people who caused the problem or didn't know that the problem existed. Whose responsibility it is to actually, again, know that there's this issue before implementing it. Again, keeping student information private and even staff information private is the role and responsibility, legally speaking, of the superintendent and all district officials, including board members. So again, as all of that was going on, and this was really the kicker. At the bottom of the Surefire report, the school board in the March 26th board meeting voted to release this report to the public, again in the interest of smearing Dawn King and making it look like she was guilty of wrongdoing. Surefire didn't arrive at any conclusion because there was no conclusion to arrive at. The only conclusion that was reached was the opinion of the other board members looking again to deflect from their own involvement and their own stupidity and negligence. And as a result, then, they again basically fabricated, which is a crime. You can't do that. You can't fabricate a summary and then arrive at a false conclusion that doesn't tell the truth. They basically said, well, Dawn King accessed this because of blah, blah, blah. That's not true. She accessed the documents to check for compliance, which she was allowed to do. And again, as a result of all of that, and like I said, this is the worst part, in releasing a document from this Surefire cyber group that was really supposed to probably remain confidential because it said so in the document, they ended up releasing the document through open records requests and voting to do so, except Dawn King voted no on its release. The rest of them said yes because they wanted to smear Dawn King and they thought it would. Joke's on them, it didn't. They ended up releasing 17 IP addresses of minors and or other family members who, of course, minors live with, which IP addresses are considered to be personal identifying markers as far as FERPA violations are concerned. Each individual IP address is its own FERPA violation. I made an open records request for that document once, and the document was sent to me twice, with both appendices. In fact, in the second email, they just sent me the appendices alone, which was a bit strange, because again, they were unredacted IP addresses of minors. It's not difficult to backtrack or backlog an IP address to a person's specific address. In fact, it's remarkably easy to do if a person lives in a rural area, like a farmhouse, because it will be quite literally on top of their home with nothing but farmland around it, because there's no neighbors. So then you, again, get on Google Maps, you scope down into the actual house, and you can see the address, look up the address, see the names of the people who live there, along with their spouses and their kids, and then you know exactly who lives there and what minors accessed what. But this is, again, exactly what the district did. They used that document in an effort to target parents and students when it came to even them checking for the district's compliance on their own misuse of their own technological system. They then threatened parents and basically blackmailed them and said, if you don't sign this particular document saying that you were the one who accessed your child's account to see if this information was available to the public or not, we're going to suspend your child, expel them, and keep them from prom, graduating and walking during graduation at the end of the year, and of course, any other student-related activity. All these parents lawyered up, all of them, with a possible class action lawsuit now going forward against the district. Me, myself, I have filed FERPA violations against all of these people involved. Every board member involved, the superintendent, and the treasurer. And I have the whole thing in chronological order, including screenshots of emails, because I put them in the Substack articles. I have far more than that, too, which shows their negligence months after the fact that this was brought to their attention. It was brought to their attention by concerned parents in February that these systems were open to past graduates from 7 years ago. That it was popping, that these calendars and this information was popping up on even their information when they would use these old emails to log in. Which means, why on earth is an old student email, still accessible or still valid long after they've graduated? Again, that's a level of technological negligence that you can't possibly rationalize away or deflect or scapegoat away. You can't do it. So let me run through, again, a couple of scenarios here. This was a particular metaphor and sort of an example that was brought to my attention, and it makes perfect sense. Ask yourself this in a similar situation. If you're in a school building and a person runs up to an administrator and says, the building is on fire. The building is on fire. Everybody could be harmed by this, and the fire is over that way, in that direction. In fact, there it is right there. The question is this: does it matter who tells you where the fire is, or that there is a fire? Or does it matter that you're being told that there is a fire that exists in a location that exists that you were unaware of in the first place? See, they're trying to kill the messengers here, and that's kind of a big no-no, because in that cover-up, that's where the cover-up is worse than the crime. So from a behavior standpoint, we're also dealing with a number of different things. I write the following in this particular Substack article titled "The Administrative Targeting of K-12 Students and Parents." Here's what I say. I said, quote, "As many are aware, this tactic or behavior is commonly referred to as psychological projection, scapegoating, or blame shifting. It occurs when a guilty party, individual, or group deflects responsibility for their actions by falsely accusing an innocent person or group of people while attempting to divert attention and avoid accountability for their own wrongdoing. This approach is commonplace within human resource departments in all lines of work. It just so happens that American K-12 schools not only do it with regularity as it's practically their policy, but they're incredibly bad at it, and they reveal themselves in the process as being the truly guilty ones. I said if someone reads the above and says to themselves, quote, "That's not true, you're to blame," I would encourage them to then understand the definitions of mutually exclusive situations or contradictory claims. For example, when two opposing parties hold conflicting views on the same issue, their positions cannot both be true simultaneously due to the law of non-contradiction. One or both must be incorrect, as the truth cannot accommodate opposite and non-cohesive assertions. I continued and wrote, another defective tactic when shifting blame may also be considered false equivalency. You've heard me bring this up before. False equivalency is a logical fallacy where two things are presented as being equal or comparable in significance, impact, or moral weight, despite clear differences in their nature, scale, or context. It often misleads by equating minor or unrelated issues with major ones, thereby obscuring the truth. For example, comparing a minor traffic violation to a serious crime, like robbery, suggests they are equally as bad. So in this particular situation, they're trying to trick people into believing that Don King not bringing this to the board privately was somehow a bad thing, and that bringing it to the public's attention for the public to know about this was a bad thing, as opposed to the district accepting responsibility, legal responsibility for the thing that they had to do from the word go. I went on and I said the opposite of false equivalency is called accurate differentiation or proportional comparison. This involves recognizing and correctly distinguishing the true differences in the significance, impact, or moral weight between two or more situations, events, or actions, rather than wrongly equating them as similar, despite their clear differences. An example, as in the case below, which I again describe regarding the district, would be accurately recognizing that the school district's policy is to always check for technological vulnerabilities as opposed to the same school district failing to do so, denying responsibility, and then falsifying documents while attempting to target innocent parents and students who found the vulnerability in the first place, while also attempting to frame a school board member for alleged wrongdoing when in fact said individual is actually doing their job based on written policy and legal responsibilities. And again, I highlight that particular policy and have highlighted it in past episodes. It's not legalese and it's not hard to understand. It's crystal flippin' clear. So that leads me now to the last board meeting this past Thursday on April 17th. And I have to tell you this first before I get into the comments and play some audio from this. I was walking around the school building after I signed in, and what I saw in the school building was disturbing, but it was not unusual. It was just saddening, and it just again bothered me. I took screenshots of some of the things that, they put on poster boards and they put on the walls for people to see, and a number of other things. And it really, again, is just, it shows a mind frame that is not healthy. There was a board that had something to do with diversity. It was all in rainbow colors. And the entire board had to do with autism. And all of these handwritten messages that are on this board about autism, not a single one of them was accurate. Not one. Not one of them was medically accurate. They actually believe that autism is a personality, that it's the way that somebody is just born. And that it doesn't mean that they're different, it just means they have a different personality. That's not it. Autism is a symptom brought about by poisoning. That's a fact. This is well known. This is not a secret. Endless white papers exist, endless books. I don't know why people don't know this. It's high levels of toxins and aluminum and formaldehyde in the brain, past the blood-brain barrier, of children before birth, in utero, and then after birth. An individual who has not been injected with anything can go through childhood not being injected with anything, and then be injected again with flu shots or MMRs or any other shot and be quote-unquote autistic by the time it's all said and done, to where their personality completely does a 180, and they go from talking and being a normal quote-unquote person to not so in the blink of an eye. So no, autism is not an accident. It is a giant on purpose. But these false messages that they have all over the school building are perpetuating these lies. Honest to Christ, it's like walking through a mental institution. It really is, and it's sad. Because I wasn't walking through any classrooms, so I couldn't see what other propaganda, evil propaganda, was on the walls in the classrooms. Again, I was just looking at what was on these bulletin boards in the hallways. But I couldn't help but, of course, notice, I mean, it's right in front of everybody's face, that next to a lot of these school classroom doors for these teachers and these employees are rainbow flags. And it says safe space, like Pride Safe Space, and there's a rainbow flag sticker there, or there's a rainbow flag magnet. It's just, again, it's a level of social engineering and childish behavior that is second to none. And these are the people doing the teaching. And here again, as a little side note, here's part of the problem is that if I say that, they'll get angry at me for saying it, but really the person I'm angry at is government, because it's government who's manipulated them and they don't even know it. They don't know that they live in the Matrix because they don't know that the Matrix is real. This is difficult for them. It's difficult for everybody. I fully understand. Waking up from the Matrix is a arduous process, but it's worth it. But if you don't know, much like the Google Calendar issue, if you don't know that there's a problem, you can never solve the problem. And if you don't know you've been the victim of the problem, and that you're actually, unbeknownst to you or knowingly, perpetuating said problem, then you're really not going to be able to fix it because you think that the thing that you're doing is the solution when in fact it is not. So now let me get to the public comments section of this meeting. In the first half of the board meeting before the public comments section, like in all board meetings, they do what they do best, which is they invite their sycophants up to give board presentations on all the quote-unquote good stuff that's happening in the district. It's usually not the case. It's just done intentionally, again, to distract and deflect from what's really transpiring. Anyway, with that aside, then it got into the actual public comments section. There were concerned parents who were targeted in this process who spoke. The first person you're going to hear is Scotty King, the husband of board member Dawn King, who did the right thing in this entire process. I understand that people disagree with her approach, but she was legally advised to do it this way. Because again, the pattern of conflict resolution for the school district is to attack the innocent. So by making this public, let's see if the public gets attacked innocently by the district, instead of the district just solving the problem. As it turns out, that's exactly what happened. They proved everybody right yet again, because this is their default setting. So you're going to hear Scotty King speak. I'm going to make a few comments here on the show right now over the microphone, and then you'll hear me speak, and then you'll hear a couple of other concerned individuals speak, and unfortunately, there are sycophants of the school district who, again, work for the school district who don't know what's going on, or are affiliated with the district as a parent or whatever in some other capacity, and they still come up to the microphone and embarrass themselves by again saying, well, we need to ignore all the bad things and all we need to do is focus on the good things. That's absurd. The building is on fire, but we should focus on how the water fountains still work and I can still get a cold drink of water. Are you high? Again, these people on drugs, that's not what you do. You solve the problem as fast as humanly possible across the board. And then you work with more knowledgeable individuals who might not work in the district to basically say, if you find more vulnerabilities, come to us and we will work with you to solve them. You would hope that they would do that, but it's not in their pattern of conflict resolution. Blame, deflection, scapegoating. I went through all of it just a second ago. You fully understand, hopefully, but that's it. And then at the end of the board meeting is when all hell broke loose. The end of the board meeting, the newest board member who was not elected but was filling in for the elected, now resigned board member David Bothist, his name is Matt Wyatt. Matt Wyatt works for Miami University and he raises money for the Farmers School of Business. And he lost his mind. Sounded completely irrational, screamed at Don King, and he called the members of the public who were concerned and bringing these concerns to the public. He called us the trifling public. He called us half-wits. And I think he called me a loser or an idiot or something along those lines. Sticks and stones, Matt. Sticks and stones. Anyway, here's Scott King in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Welcome to visitors, public participation. Just the general typical reminders, 3 minutes each, 30 minutes total. I'll have a timer here. When you get to 15 minutes, I'll give you a reminder. We welcome comments from residents who have business with the district. Please remember to address the board, not individuals and not the audience. And remember, this is our time to listen.
3 minutes and warning at 15 seconds?
Yes, 3 minutes and a reminder at 15 seconds. So first up, we have Scotty King.
Scotty King, Dartown, Ohio. Ed lied directly to everyone on March 20, 2025. He didn't inherit the school assignment, in-school assignment. He created it. I pulled a public records request for the past 10 years, and it only existed for the last 3.5. So, Becky, Pat, are you going to address this like you said you would? I didn't think so, but I would also like to understand why the district approved sending a principal to Hawaii for a 4.5-hour training, which cost the district $3,700. Insane considering the training was offered online. Today, I bring your attention to another serious breach. The district Surefire report approved for the public release by the board, except for Dawn, contains students' IP addresses, which can be linked to their home address. Private information not included in the directory. This constitutes a clear FERPA violation again. Is the board going to investigate the community members that are sharing the report? No, because it's the district's fault. They made the document public. So if you share the document now, criminal charges are going to be filed against you? No. No crime was committed. Let me be clear. Don doesn't share information with me. An anonymous source provides the troubling information about the internal operations, which I present, not as an instigator, but as a concerned citizen. For instance, I get these, this is what I get. I have all these little cut up letters and things. So just to let you guys know, somebody on the inside really doesn't like you guys. So for instance, I'll let you guys know, see if you know. A director reportedly had lost files for threat assessments, raising questions about record keeping integrity over 2 years ago. Did you guys know that? One of your administrators is allegedly to have engaged in an inappropriate relationship with an employee, which, if true, undermines the district's ethical standards. Did you know that? Furthermore, I asked members recognize this phone number, 4685, ending in 4685. it has a relevance to someone up there. The whole reason I started speaking at the board meetings is because Becky came to my house a year ago and implied if I didn't cool it on the request, I might not see my son's graduation. She also asked me to cool it while she was going on a 2-week vacation plane to Michigan. So in the past 2 years, the district has threatened my son's GPA, attempted to exclude him from the National Honor Society, sent his personal information to the TEA, tried to keep me from my son's
15
graduation.
seconds.
These actions are not indicative of a school district, but of an organized crime organization. Becky, I would like to finish with the scripture just for you, Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I really think you guys need to find it in your cold hearts to accept the Lord and understand what you're doing and why you're on the wrong path. Thank you.
Again, there's a lot there. He hit a lot of huge points. All of it malfeasance on the part of the district, them not knowing, being unaware of endless things. Again, it's a dirty house. But if they don't know it's a dirty house, or they don't care, or they think that a dirty house is a way to control people or manipulate people, and keeping it dirty is the best way to handle business, they have another thing coming. That's not the way that it works. The one thing that endless human beings across America have learned, certainly over the last 10 years, is that fiscal irresponsibility is a problem. And I think that lots of Americans, your average citizen, is getting their own house in order when it comes to, again, fiscal responsibility. You would hope that's the case anyway. But certainly when it comes to other business-related issues and ethical issues and policies and professionalism and whatever, if people aren't paying attention to the real world and not learning these lessons, then they're just doomed to repeat them. These are just going to be behaviors, again, that they repeat because they become ingrained in the person. He brought up the in-school assignment issue. This is a particular, again, it's fraud. But in-school assignment is not in-school suspension. It's a separate category that was created by the district to protect certain students from in-school suspension. Because in-school suspension has to be reported to the state. Which means if you're trying to keep information from the state on purpose, what are you doing? This is why David Bothist is no longer on the school board. His adopted son was being protected with the in-school assignment designation when he was assaulting physically female students, threatening to kill them, and then sexually harassing them online. So in-school assignment was used, not in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or expulsion for a board member's adopted son. That's a fact. There's no denying that. David Bothist can deny it all he'd like, online or wherever else. There's no denying it. That's 100% known by endless people. But he's a pathological liar, so again, if he wants to lie, I suppose he could, but that doesn't make him look more honest. It's not the way that works. Not to mention, of course, you heard the coughing there from Board President Rebecca Howard. I mean, why are you coughing in April? How many shots did you take? I mean, it's, rather obvious. Again, board members threatening parents. Scott and Dawn King had their son threatened by the board president. That if you don't work with us and you don't stop making open records requests, we're going to threaten your son by saying he can't graduate. I mean, or something along those lines. Again, who does that? No one professional does that. So is there a pattern of board members specifically attacking parents and students in the district in the interest of retribution or blackmail? Yes. See how dirty this gets? But they don't accept any responsibility for anything. Of course, he brought up the IP addresses as well. He brought up some alleged inappropriate relationships with staff members with other staff members. That's not a good look. This is interesting stuff. So I signed up next. I signed the sheet, Dr. Sean Brooks. She refers to me as Mr. Brooks. Okay. The other thing, too, which was funny, is later on, some gal comes up to the microphone and she says, I noticed that on the sign-up sheet, not everybody writes their address and that they're supposed to and blah, blah, blah. Look, we all live around here. Everybody knows that everybody lives around here. People can look me up on the internet and see where I live. I'm not going to write my address on the piece of paper. There's no need. Everybody knows I live here in town. It's not a secret. So why do you need my address? So you can vandalize my property? Shut up. I'm not going to do that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you wanted to try to vandalize my property, good luck. Either way, here's my comments in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Recommend that everybody get their cell phones out, give you a website, theamericanclassroom.substack.com. I put an article up there about this entire Google fiasco in chronological on my opinion and documentation that I have. First of all, conspiracy to commit fraud is a huge crime. I'm not telling you this to threaten you. Anybody can read the law. Dereliction of duty, that's a misdemeanor. But where it slides into fraud and falsification is when you get together to go after a fellow board member. Now, in the last board meeting, which was super entertaining, you actually all voted to release a document that had personal identifying markers on it, which are IP addresses of minors, except Don King voted no. The rest of you did not. In fact, in that Surefire document on the front page, the cover page, it says privileged and confidential, which probably means it was for you and not the public. On the second page, it actually warns you that you might get sued in the last sentence of the first paragraph. And then, this is the part I like, in the next paragraph, in the first sentence, it calls me a concerned citizen. Not by name, but it was me. So I want to personally thank Surefire Cyber for complimenting me. Because I did what anybody should do. In fact, it's your job. You have the job, right, role, and responsibility to look at any and all flaws on any technology or any paperwork that exists in the district. That's why you work for the government. That's literally your job. So you voted to release a document that exonerates Don King, indicts you as being careless with your Google system, and you voted to release this document with 17 IP addresses unredacted. I asked for the document once in an open records request. It was sent to me twice. Now, I'm no math major, but that's 34 FERPA violations in one email.
15 seconds, please.
And then it was sent to at least 7 other people as of April 1st. That's hundreds now. The federal government knows about this now. So does the state government. When the feds look at this,
please wrap it up.
And they don't take their eyes off of you. It's not a threat. I'm just saying, do your job.
Again, I really don't have to elaborate. I've already described it before. But they, again, voted on a document to release it to the public, which thereby makes themselves actually guilty of the very thing that they accused Don King of doing, which she had the right to do. Later on in the board meeting, there's a back and forth between Matt Wyatt and Don King, where Matt Wyatt goes, "You didn't have the right to look at that." And she goes, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, "No, you didn't." See that right there, that back and forth of I have the right, and then somebody goes, no, you don't. Again, those are the contradictory claims that go back and forth where both parties can't be right. And again, it's also false equivalency because one person is saying, well, this is right, and the other person is saying, well, it's not. Or one person is saying, this is worse than something else. They don't equate. And again, in the discussion that takes place later, you'll hear the board members, they clearly don't know their policy, because if they did, they would reference it. But they don't reference it because they know that it indicts them. They purposefully don't address it because it indicts them. And they also don't address ever releasing the IP addresses of minors, which is a FERPA violation, as I said earlier. They don't address that ever. Now, here's the next person you're going to hear, and this is Susie Stein. She does a great job also. This was one of the parents who was targeted by the school district, and her child was targeted by the school district, and she was asked to sign a piece of paper, again, under blackmail and under duress. Again, as if to say, sign this or else. And that was essentially it. But again, they came after her. Why? Because she checked to see, or her son or whomever checked to see if the system was wide open and verified that, in fact, it was wide open. Well, yeah, she has the right to do that too. And you would think that a school district would be grateful that that would be the case, that they would eventually figure this out, and they could have fixed it immediately. But like I said, it took them months. And hell, who knows? It's probably still open and probably still has vulnerabilities for all I know. But either way, here's Susie Stein's comments in 3, 2, 1.
My name is Susie Stein, and I live in Oxford. I just wanted to come tonight and address a few things. At your last meeting on March 26th, Mr. Mead went on a rant attacking Ms. King regarding how he felt as though she was harming kids with her actions. Shortly after that, all of you, except for Ms. King, made a very bad decision to release the cybersecurity report, once again violating FERPA, and a whole lot more. It also 100% confirmed that the 3 student accounts that you spoke of were very much targeted. As if that were not bad enough, after that obnoxious, unprofessional rant, you chose to do exactly what you were accusing Ms. King of. If that is not gaslighting, I don't know what is. I find it absolutely appalling that you chose to resort to the level of extortion of children, all for a smear campaign of 3 families that you don't care for to shift the blame off where it solely resides. 3,511 views, 145 student access views, but the client deemed unauthorized, only 3. You are the ones that are consistently harming children. You are the ones who consistently do not protect them. You are the ones who refuse to ever take responsibility for your actions. That ends here. To the families in the district with students, past or present, on a 504 IEP, or have had disciplinary meetings, expulsion hearings, or any other meeting request in Google Calendars. If you would like to join the class action lawsuit that we have started and will be filing against the district, please reach out to me, Susie Stein, or even if you're unsure if your information was out there, you can contact me. That is, unless our public records department would like to, again, give us all of that information. What's one more FERPA violation? We, the citizens of this community, did not elect you to be unprofessional, lack integrity, ethics, and morals, as well as run this district through fear and intimidation. We are calling for not only the immediate resignation of the superintendent and the one providing all the records that continue to repeatedly violate FERPA, but also the board members who voted yes to this investigation and extortion of students. This is absolutely unacceptable on every level from all of you. Absolutely. Mr. Wyatt, in your speech tonight, you spoke of how government funding is being cut. I would like to state from every citizen in this district that you know what else falls on taxpayers?
15 seconds.
Irresponsible spending. The amount of money that we have uselessly spent on attorney fees that could be spent and given back to the general fund, if we would quit spending money on attorney fees for things that we should not be doing, that would be great. That could be spent much better ways. Thank you.
Again, class action lawsuit, that's nice, and it will stick. Again, she's lawyered up, so have other individuals. There's no doubt about it. The number of violations here are endless. Again, the falsified portion of this, and there were many, but the falsified had to do with the number of individuals that the Surefire report openly showed when it came to the number of people who accessed this information, and yet the district basically said that only a few people accessed the information who were unauthorized. That's not true. The Surefire report shows quite the opposite. There were at least 100 plus individuals who were unauthorized who viewed this content. But they're not going after them. They're just hand selecting a few parents and a few students who they don't politically align with, while other individuals logged in to again see if the system was open. That's why there's no crime here. That's why there's no criminal investigation for parents or students when it comes to looking at any of this information, let alone me. And there won't be, because there is no crime. You left the system open. It's like it's like a door being open in a person's house, and you stick your head through the door, and you don't live there, and you go, "Is anybody home?" And then they decide to charge you with breaking and entering. It's quite literally just like that. You can't do that. That doesn't happen. You're checking to see if someone's home. Maybe you're checking to see if someone's dead. Maybe you're checking to see if someone's missing. Yeah, it's not your home, but it doesn't matter. It looks suspicious. Something looks off. Something looks odd. But they go, no, you broke in. You were trespassing. It was breaking and entering. No, it wasn't. Everybody knows it wasn't. So they got caught. I love it. Here's the next individual. This is Mindy Napier, another patriot. She also ran for school board. I voted for her a number of years ago, and she cuts them down too. Again, speaking the truth, no doubt about it. And as she says at the end, I thought your policy was see something, say something. And she, of course, does. And she brings this to everybody's attention as well. So give her a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Mindy Napier.
Mindy Napier. I live in Milford Township. I attended the recent special session and left feeling like I just watched a stage performance. I know how much Dr. Howard loves the theater, so I'm just kind of curious if she was the executive producer of that mess. I need to address something that's creating a deeply uncomfortable and toxic atmosphere in these meetings. The way Pat Mead speaks to Don King. The tone, the interruptions, the mocking, the dismissive language. It reeks of misogyny. It undermines her contributions to the board, which she has many. And I'm not the only one who has noticed or is disgusted by the ongoing pattern. Constructive dialogue is impossible when a board member is being treated with such blatant disrespect. While I'm on the subject of Mr. Mead, at the last meeting, he spoke passionately about children's safety. But I have serious questions about whether his words are being matched by his actions. Specifically, I'm disturbed at the fact that Danielle Mann was allowed to return to the classroom. Also, Drew Edwards, she was permitted to return and also finish out her contract. But I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Paul Stivers was allowed to remain in this district, allegedly abusing children for how many years? And now this district is facing a massive federal lawsuit, thanks to not only Mr. Mead, Dr. Thoreau, and the previous board members prior to Ms. King's arrival. I still remember the meeting where Mr. Stivers was allowed to resign. Mr. Mead's comment, "We just want to put this all behind us." That sounded more like predator advocacy than it did to student protection to me. The hypocrisy of the comments made at the last meeting was astounding. At no point has student safety ever been the real priority. Protecting insiders has always come first. Targeting those that don't favor what they believe seems what is truly matters to them. And as always, there is zero accountability in this district. Dr. Thoreau's administration continues to punish and extort students and families to cover for the district's mistakes. At the end of every district communication, the phrase that is always finished is "see something, say something." I just did.
Mindy did very well. That was very well done. And she ran down the list, and she knocked it out of the park again. Again, when you tell the truth, you don't need a good memory. But when you lie, it becomes very difficult to remember what you've said yourself, what you've said in the past, what you continue to say, because it's one lie after another that you have to somehow remember and piece together. While everybody is watching you attempt to do that, and all we need is, again, the truth, because we don't need a good memory. It's crystal clear what's going on here. Everybody knows who has a brain, who is objective, knows exactly what's happening here. So again, I'm going to conclude with this regarding this particular issue just right now. I too have made more records requests. The board continues to complain that records requests and making them is somehow an intimidation tactic. It's not. It's our right as Americans. We get to do that. It doesn't cost school districts any money to make open records requests. This is why treasurers get paid copious amounts of money. This is why superintendents get paid, again, a great deal of money. This is the point. It's quite literally in their job description. But the portion, again, at the end of the meeting, rather, where board member Matt Wyatt and the other board members make comments, Pat Mead makes a comment, Chris Otto agrees with everybody blindly because he's incapable of an original thought. And then, of course, Rebecca Howard just blindly agrees, and then they all vote. And they vote to censure Don King. What they don't understand is that, number one, well, they do know this, that censuring somebody doesn't mean anything. It just means that they publicly disagree with the way that Don King handled this, when it turns out Don King did exactly what she was supposed to do based on, again, their previous actions as a superintendent and as board members. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. She brought it to the public. Bring it to the public, let the public see, let the public find out, and then let's see if the school district fixes it or not, or again, let's see if they start to frame people. Well, they started to frame people. So that's how this wrapped up. But this isn't over. Again, I'm in possession of more documentation that's incredibly damning, that continues to go through how they didn't have this problem fixed in the slightest, all the way through February. And again, I don't know if there are more problems or not. There might be, there might not be. Who's to say? But it almost sounds like, again, they're almost inquiring about getting rid of Google altogether and going with a completely different system. Well, it's a little too late. It's too little too late, because it boils down to this. Why have policy and why have law and why have FERPA to begin with if there aren't going to be consequences for the people who allowed this to happen? If there aren't consequences, then why have these policies and laws in place in the first place? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to link the last Substack article, which included audio clips, direct timestamps, as a matter of fact, to when these individuals talk. The board members, at the end, again, they lose their cool and they start screaming at us, and I yell a few things back at them, and there's a back and forth that goes on. Again, they continue to disrespect Don King in the entire process. Matt Wyatt tells her to shut up, basically. He didn't say shut up, but he said be quiet, and he screamed it. Because I don't know, he's unhinged, and that's putting it mildly. Pat Mead looks at Scott King and tells him to be a man. Don't interrupt me because I don't interrupt you, and be a man. I mean, you don't get to egg on the public like that. Make your comments and go home. But either way, again, they got caught, and they actually think they can talk their way out of this. So if you want to listen to the last 20, 30 minutes of that exchange, which is interesting to say the least, It's the last video in my most recent Substack. Again, I will link it in the description below. You can click on it, scroll right to the bottom where you'll see the last video clip, and then just hit play, and it'll play it. But that's that's the ongoing situation here. So people have the right to file FERPA violations. I've done it. They should do it too. The Ethics Commission is getting contacted. Same thing with the State Department of Ed. This is how this gets done. This is oversight. This is exactly what the citizens of government are supposed to do. And everybody has the right to do it, whether you're an advocate for children, an advocate for parents, whether you're a lawyer or not, or you just know the process and you are a parent or a staff member or a student or whomever who has been victimized by a school district. Everybody has the right to do this. But again, you prove who you are through your actions. And if school districts, again, just did the right thing instead of their default human resource department setting being, let's deflect blame and image protect, then you're never going to get the right conclusion. You're going to lose trust throughout the entire process because you can't be trusted. And that's the way that it works. But like you've heard me say a million times, this unfortunately is policy. That behavior is human resource development policy throughout the entire business. And again, it's basically human resource to policy in almost every line of work. Shoot first, ask questions later. Leap before looking. And accuse before accepting responsibility. I'm going to end with this. Just a little jab-related news here. This was interesting, and this right here should scare the normies to some extent. Again, it's almost accurate. It's a bit vague, but it's more accurate than the story that they all blindly believed, I guess, and certainly were told. The White House itself has put out a COVID-19 Origins LabLeak website. And it's titled, the website, whitehouse.gov/LabLeak True Origins of COVID-19. I'm going to run through some of these steps here. Just real quickly, although the website itself is rather long, and it includes, of course, the U.S. House of, House of Representatives Oversight Committee regarding their COVID-19 conclusions, so to speak, that they reached. But at the top, it says the origin. It says the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials and the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was promoted by Dr. Fauci to push the preferred narrative that COVID-19 originated naturally. And of course, as we know, it did not. It openly says, again, this was created in the form of a shot. It was injected into people. Those people went out into the public, spread it to others, etc., etc. Now, that's only part of the story. 5G implementation, previous shots that were taken by individuals in 2019, more 5G implementation and turning that up to 11, and then individuals shedding on one another through electromagnetic radiation by getting around one another, because that's how illness and disease spread. Not through coughing and sneezing, but through proximity. And again, this website alone immediately discredits the individuals who blindly believed what was going on, and it highlights names, organizations, failures, you name it. It's damning. It's a damning website. So I highly recommend, again, taking a look at that if you have not. Again, it's whitehouse.gov/LabLeak True Origins of COVID-19. You can also, of course, type that into any search engine and it should pop up. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always. Hope everybody had a great Easter. I will catch you on Friday. And again, the most recent Substack where you can listen to the end of that board meeting is attached in the description below. Until Friday, take care. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.